Hello everyone and welcome to Not So Newsworthy for the 13th of October 2018. This week I come to you live from the Academic Agent's Room of Immoral Things. Let's jump in, shall we? Jeremy Corbyn has attacked the British schooling system this week, arguing that children should be indoctrinated about the role and legacy of the British Empire and colonialism. When I, as a relatively patriotic sort, look at the role and legacy of the British Empire, I see that despite some brutal wars, the outcome for the nations invaded by the British seems to have been positive on balance. The Empire massively improved nations' infrastructure, brought democracy to many feuding powers, supported the Commonwealth, provided a system of law that was superior to the off-tribal systems previously in place, and it brought a general standard of education. I'm not saying there weren't costs to colonialism for the nations involved. Many, if not all of those nations, lost men and women to disease, to conscription, to theft. A terrible price to pay, and not at all justifiable if we were talking about today. However, comparatively to the rest of the world at that time, the British Empire was a force for relative good. However, Jeremy Corbyn would rather the focus be upon Black Britain's struggle for racial equality, and apparently how that differed from the struggle for racial equality everywhere else in the world. Mr. Corbyn does make one salient point, saying Black History Month should not be confined to a single month, but Morgan Freeman already made this point years ago in a world-famous interview. It's insulting. Why constrain Black history to a single month? It makes no sense. He immediately goes on to state, Jeremy Corbyn this is, that it is more important now more than ever that we learn and understand as a society the role and legacy of the British Empire, colonialism and slavery. I will point out we did end slavery, Jeremy. That slavery was a universal global practice that still persists in the backwards parts of the world today. William Wilberforce, the British MP, fought until effectively his dying breath, literally weeks just before he died, to ensure that slavery was abolished in the UK. The benefit of having the British Empire at that time, of course, meant that the British Navy spent the next, few years trawling for slave ships of slaves to free. That is one of the legacies of the British Empire in regards to slavery. In fact, it's the most important legacy of the British Empire in regards to slavery. If you're going to talk about the treatment of slaves, again, compared to the rest of the world at the time, we treated ours rather well. I suspect Mr. Corbyn's agenda would have him omit the context of the world that the Empire was in favour of simply hammering into the youth that the Empire was bad. Look at all the bad things it did. And so I add to the list of things I never wish Jeremy Corbyn to control, the education system. Moving on to the NHS, where it has emerged that terminal breast cancer patients are being abandoned due to the nursing shortage. Thousands are being denied access to the specialists they need, according to the charity Breast Cancer Care. Our staggering figures reveal just how much NHS nursing care for people with incurable breast cancer has stagnated, says Samia Al-Qadi, the CEO of BCC. I am not particularly anti or pro NHS, and this is not surprising to me. The NHS suffers from a chronic overpopulation of senior faculty, absorbing a lot of the funding that the NHS should use to utilise for patient care. I also don't understand why, given that it is such a priority, there aren't adverts across the nation appealing for nursing students, or subsidies for said students, so they don't end up in as much debt doing it as other degree courses, or degree level courses. It's not because the NHS can't afford it, it's because they are unwilling to make cuts where it matters. The military is very much aware that it suffers from a similar problem, where senior officers are effectively unfireable and have jobs invented for them so that they can continue in the service at a rank that should not be doing the tasks that they are. The bloating at the top end of the NHS causes a great deal of damage to the bottom, and to the patients it attempts to care for. Still, back to the nurses specifically. Scrap the student loan requirement for student nurses until the shortage is over, have them train on the NHS's pound at a time-served commitment, much like military service, study on an NHS programme and you'll do 10 years in the NHS, say. The cost of training will be covered per student, meaning that institutions cannot charge an unreasonable amount as we are seeing in current higher education. Et voila, nurses shortage abated. Simplistic, my probably flawed idea, but it doesn't take long to consider the incentives that will encourage people into a certain profession. I don't understand why we don't see posters everywhere advertising nursing college as a viable career option if the shortage is so drastic. Anyway, an NHS spokesperson responded to the damning report by Breast Cancer Care and stated, "Everyone with cancer is unique." Got to get that inclusion in there. And patients themselves say their experience of being looked after is getting better every year, which makes sense as their chances of surviving cancer are now at its highest ever. Yes, NHS spokesperson, it is at its highest ever, due to technological breakthroughs in the research sector for cancer, and in spite of, not due to, failing NHS standards and employment. On to my main topic of the week. Breitbart leaked an internal Google briefing, ineptly named The Good Censor, this week, admitting a commitment to the abandonment of free speech in favour of safety and civility, or as I call it, a digital cage where progress is halted, debate is quashed, and the rise of alternative media is strangled. People can't be expected to assess information for themselves, you see. The marketplace of ideas is a disease to the tech giants like Google. Their moral responsibility to safeguard citizens blinds them to the fact that they are not all-knowing. They are not always correct. They are not adequate arbiters of morality and truth. What defines a reputable source in their mind is currently established. They want to stagnate the reporting of media and to limit people's exposure to new, and sometimes incorrect, it is true, perspectives. How do new media corporations and entities expect to compete with one another now, when it is impossible to be verified as reputable if a single piece of evidence is ever incorrect, incomplete, or missing data? When did the ability to retract and issue statements of correction not become a credible enough way to deal with misinformation? I digress. Let's look at what their presentation actually said. The 85-page briefing, which means that they spent a considerable amount of money on this, admits that Google and other tech companies now control the majority of online conversations and have undertaken a shift towards censorship in response to unwelcome political events around the world. What's that phrase? Yes. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What gives them the right to inflict their viewpoint on us without giving the right to respond? Because that's what free speech is, in part, the right to respond. The left in particular may propose interventions that are noble in goal, but flawed in execution. They assume that the centre and the right do not have the benefit of the common person at the heart of their policy and political choices. What constitutes help? Is it welfare, or is it helping someone help themselves? What constitutes correct? What is the outcome, not just the intent? People can be blind on all sides of the political spectrum, and to give control to one side of the dialogue not only undermines democracy, communication, comparison and contrast, but restricts you, the viewer, like nothing else will, particularly in our interconnected world today. Google's briefing associates tech companies with their new role of guaranteeing civility. The document bemoans that the internet allows have-a-go commentators to compete with so-called authoritative sources. I'm sorry, but have you seen any so-called reputable newspaper? Every single opinion piece in The Guardian has a go at something. Every attack on any government move or policy by CNN is having a go. The only difference between me attacking cultural shifts, government or popular figures, and you, the media corporation, is my political leaning, the size of my audience, and the amount of money changing hands. This has all come to a head, of course, with the banning of more than 800 Facebook accounts in the run-up to the midterm elections in the US. Awfully convenient timing, that. These aren't just some small fry either. These pages had collectively millions of followers. The justification? Inauthentic behaviour. This included spam, fair enough, posting comments to stir political debate. That's the point of the media. To report events and to discuss them, and to encourage the discussion of them in homes across the world. To money-motivated ad farms disguising themselves as forums for discussion. You mean they were turning a profit? Running a news site or page or podcast in a capitalistic way, supporting themselves off the back of their own research, work and publishing, is wrong now. I'm sure I disagree heavily with many of the accounts that are banned. They hold opinions which will be abhorrent to me. But these reasons, with the exception of spam, for their removal are not only downright criminal, but infringe on the core values of what the media is supposed to be about. The interpretation of facts can take many turns, and the more voices that can offer insight, the better. The free marketplace of ideas is where progress happens, not in little echo chambers. The motivations of these banned accounts seems to be economic or politically driven. These pages are not just motivated by the goodness of their hearts, but also by clicks, and by the financial return of those clicks, as well as their content. It is a requirement of those who build online business to turn a profit in order to survive. If it's spam, fair enough, get rid of it. But politics and political leaning is not a legitimate reason to ban accounts unless you're going to make Facebook a completely apolitical space where no news can post. And you know what? I don't think that's going to happen. Do you? Thank you very much for watching. This has been Not So Newsworthy for the 13th of October 2018. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you would like to support me on Patreon, please follow the link in the description or on my channel page. Every donation really does help me. Have a great week.